Sergeant Major Hartwell's expression soured the moment Corporal Reina Vasquez approached the equipment requisition desk. "Not the M4A1, he said before she could speak, his finger already moving to the standard infantry checklist. Standard loadout for reconnaissance missions. Period. The three soldiers behind her in line exchanged glances, one suppressing a smirk, as Hartwell's tone made it clear he expected no argument from the compact woman barely clearing regulation height requirements. "I need to request specialized equipment for tomorrow's operation, sir." Reina kept her voice steady despite the dismissive grunt that escaped from Staff Sergeant Chun, who was reviewing manifests at the adjacent desk. Her hands remained clasped behind her back in perfect regulation posture, though she could feel the weight of skeptical stares from everyone within earshot of the busy supply depot. Hartwell's clipboard hit the counter with deliberate force. "Specialized equipment?" His voice carried enough volume that conversations at nearby stations paused. "Vasquez, you've been here exactly 47 days. The only thing you're specialized in is following orders and staying out of the way." Two corporals near the ammunition locker stopped their conversation entirely, turning to watch what they clearly expected would be an entertaining denial. "The M107A1 Barrett, sir. A custom scope configuration and subsonic ammunition for extended range operations." Reina spoke each word clearly, her pronunciation precise despite the immediate scoff from Chun, whose head snapped up from his paperwork. The depot's background noise seemed to fade as more personnel within the concrete wall facility found reasons to pause their tasks and observe the unusual exchange. Hartwell's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline, while his mouth opened slightly in what appeared to be genuine surprise rather than consideration. "A Barrett? You want a 50 caliber sniper rifle?" His question carried the tone usually reserved for explaining basic concepts to new recruits, each word emphasized as if she might not understand the magnitude of her request. "Son of a bitch," whispered someone from the group of Marines sorting gear near the far wall, their comment barely audible but clearly impressed by the audacity. Before we continue with this story, take a moment to drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've seen situations like this in your local military communities where assumptions about capability were completely wrong. The requisition sheet remained untouched in Hartwell's weathered hands as he leaned forward across the metal counter, bringing his face closer to hers with the obvious intention of making his next words heard by the growing audience. "That weapon system requires advanced marksmanship training, specialized certification, and mission-critical authorization that takes months to process." His index finger tapped the counter 3 times for emphasis. "What makes you think a 47-day corporal with 0 verified combat deployments qualifies for equipment that seasoned snipers compete for?" Private Martinez from the earlier supply line had moved close enough to hear every word, his expression a mixture of second-hand embarrassment and fascination with what he clearly viewed as professional suicide. Next to him, Sergeant Torres shook his head slowly, the gesture conveying both pity and disbelief at witnessing such a spectacular miscalculation of one's place in the military hierarchy. "The Barrett requires specific atmospheric calculations, windage compensation at extended ranges, and ballistic expertise that develops over years of specialized training," Hartwell continued, his voice gaining momentum as if warming to a familiar lecture. "The standard M4A1 with an ACOG scope provides more than adequate precision for reconnaissance work. Hell, it's more precision than most people can handle effectively." Shin nodded agreement from his position, clearly enjoying the educational moment that was unfolding at someone else's expense. "I understand the technical requirements, sir." Reina's response came without hesitation, her tone maintaining the same respectful steadiness despite the obvious entertainment value her presence was providing to the assembled spectators. Her dark eyes never left Hartwell's face, even as she could sense the growing collection of uniformed personnel who had found reasons to linger within listening distance of the requisition desk. Hartwell straightened to his full height, using every inch of his imposing frame to reinforce the hierarchy that seemed threatened by this unexpected conversation. Understanding and capability are entirely different things, Corporal. The technical manuals can teach anyone the theory. Practical application under combat conditions requires experience you simply haven't acquired yet. His tone softened slightly, as if explaining reality to someone who genuinely needed guidance rather than correction. The depot's fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows across the assembled faces, each person present seemingly riveted by this unusual deviation from standard protocol. Equipment assignments follow established procedures for excellent reasons, Vasquez. These weapons aren't toys to experiment with during field exercises. They're precision instruments that can determine mission success or failure, life or death outcomes for entire teams, depending on their proper deployment. Sergeant First Class Williams emerged from the secure storage area, his attention immediately drawn by the unusual cluster of personnel surrounding the requisition desk. His experienced gaze swept across the scene, quickly assessing the situation before settling on Reyna, with an expression that suggested he was witnessing something both unprecedented and potentially problematic for everyone involved in this increasingly public discussion. Williams approached the requisition desk with a measured stride of someone accustomed to resolving situations before they escalated beyond reasonable boundaries. His weathered face showed no particular emotion as he surveyed the unusual gathering, though his eyes lingered on Reyna with what appeared to be professional curiosity rather than the obvious skepticism radiating from the other personnel crowding the immediate area. "What seems to be the issue here, Sergeant Major?" Williams directed his question to Hartwell, while maintaining awareness of the dozen uniformed spectators who had found various reasons to remain within earshot of what was clearly becoming an unprecedented equipment discussion. His tone carried the authority of someone whose opinions carried significant weight in operational decisions. Hartwell's relief at having backup was visible in the slight relaxation of his shoulders as he gestured toward Reyna with his clipboard. "Corporal Vasquez is requesting a Barrett 50 caliber system for tomorrow's reconnaissance mission, Sergeant, along with custom optics and subsonic ammunition." His emphasis on the word custom made it sound like she had requested experimental alien technology rather than specialized but available military equipment. "A Barrett?" Williams repeated the weapon designation slowly, his eyebrows rising as he processed this information. The nearby Marines who had been sorting equipment abandoned any pretense of working, their attention completely focused on what was developing into the most entertaining supply depot conversation anyone could remember witnessing during routine operations. Chen looked up from his paperwork again, clearly unable to resist contributing to what he viewed as an educational opportunity. "Sergeant Williams, she's been here 47 days. No combat deployments, no advanced marksmanship certifications on file, and no supervisor recommendations for specialized weapon systems." The stack of standard requisition forms in front of him served as a visual reminder of how routine equipment assignments typically proceeded. 47 days, Williams mused, his gaze returning to Reyna with increased interest. His tone suggested he was genuinely curious about her reasoning rather than immediately dismissive, which seemed to surprise several of the watching personnel who expected swift rejection of such an unusual request from someone so recently assigned to the unit. Private Martinez leaned closer to Sergeant Torres, whispering loud enough for others to hear. "Think she even knows how much a Barrett weighs?" Torres responded with a slight shake of his head, his expression conveying doubt that someone of Reyna's slight build could effectively handle the massive weapon system she was requesting for field operations. The technical specifications alone should be enough to discourage this request, Hartwell continued, warming to his theme as he addressed Williams. "Effective range exceeding 2,000 meters, specialized ballistic calculations required for every shot, and recoil management that challenges even experienced marksmen." He paused dramatically. "We're not running a training course here, Sergeant. This is operational readiness." Williams nodded thoughtfully, his experienced hands clasped behind his back as he considered the situation. The fluorescent lighting overhead cast stark shadows across his lined face, emphasizing the gravity he brought to equipment decisions that could impact mission success. Corporal Vasquez, what's your background with long-range precision systems? Limited training opportunities in my previous assignment, sir, but I've studied the technical manuals extensively and practiced ballistic calculations during off-duty hours. Reyna's answer prompted visible eye rolls from two corporals near the ammunition storage, their expressions suggesting they found academic preparation insufficient for real-world application. Study the manuals, Chen repeated with barely concealed amusement. His tone implied that manual study ranked somewhere between useless and potentially dangerous when discussing weapons capable of eliminating targets at extreme distances. Reading about something and actually doing it under pressure are completely different experiences, Corporal. The growing audience showed no signs of dispersing as word of the unusual conversation spread through the depot. Sergeant Davies emerged from the communications section, drawn by the unusual cluster of personnel around what should have been a routine equipment assignment. His presence added another layer of authority to an already complex situation. Williams studied Reyna's face carefully, searching for something that wasn't immediately apparent to the other personnel present. Have you ever fired a .50 caliber system, Corporal? His question carried no judgment, but the implications were clear to everyone listening. Theoretical knowledge without practical experience typically resulted in mission failures at best, casualties at worst. No, sir, not the Barrett specifically. Reyna's honest admission prompted knowing looks between several spectators, their expressions confirming what they had suspected about her qualifications for such sophisticated equipment. Her honesty seemed to surprise Williams, who apparently expected either exaggeration or deflection from someone making such an ambitious request. Then why exactly are you requesting equipment you've never used for an operational mission? Williams' question wasn't hostile, but it carried the weight of someone who understood the life-or-death consequences of improper equipment assignments. The depot fell unusually quiet as everyone present waited for an answer that might explain this bewildering situation. Hartwell seized the opening, his confidence restored by what appeared to be inevitable vindication of his initial assessment. Sergeant Williams, I recommend standard reconnaissance loadout. M4A1 with ACOG optics, standard ammunition load, and backup communication equipment. Proven systems that won't compromise mission parameters or endanger personnel through equipment unfamiliarity. The assembled personnel seemed to collectively exhale, apparently believing the situation was reaching its logical conclusion. Private Martinez whispered something to Torres that prompted a quiet chuckle. Both soldiers clearly viewing this as an amusing break from routine duties rather than a serious equipment consideration. Williams crossed his arms and studied Reyna with the intensity of someone evaluating a complex tactical problem that defied standard solutions. The depot's background noise had diminished to almost complete silence as personnel throughout the facility found reasons to pause their activities and observe this unprecedented equipment negotiation that was stretching far beyond normal protocols. Corporal, tomorrow's mission involves reconnaissance of suspected enemy positions at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters. Williams spoke deliberately, ensuring his words carried to the assembled audience. Standard infantry weapons provide adequate accuracy for target identification and basic engagement protocols. What specific operational requirement demands a .50 caliber system for this particular assignment? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Reyna could feel the collective skepticism radiating from every person present. Sergeant Davies had moved closer, positioning himself where he could hear every word while maintaining the appearance of checking inventory sheets. Two additional Marines had emerged from the vehicle maintenance bay, drawn by word that something unusual was happening at the requisition desk. Intelligence reports suggest hardened positions with reinforced observation points, sir. Standard rounds may not penetrate their defensive structures effectively, and the extended range capability could provide overwatch protection for the reconnaissance team if contact becomes necessary. Reyna's tactical reasoning was sound, but her delivery prompted skeptical expressions from the experienced personnel surrounding her. Hardened positions? Chun interjected, his tone suggesting he found her assessment overly optimistic about her capabilities. Corporal, penetrating reinforced structures requires precise shot placement under combat stress. That level of accuracy develops over years of specialized training, not from reading technical specifications during downtime. Private Martinez nudged Torres with his elbow, whispering just loud enough for nearby personnel to hear. Think she's planning to single-handedly take out enemy positions? His comment drew quiet chuckles from several spectators who apparently viewed her tactical assessment as evidence of inexperience rather than legitimate operational planning. Williams maintained his professional demeanor despite the growing amusement among the assembled personnel. Have you reviewed the ballistic tables for subsonic 50-caliber ammunition at extended ranges, Corporal? Environmental factors significantly impact trajectory calculations, especially at the distances you're discussing. His question wasn't meant to embarrass, but it highlighted technical complexities that typically challenged even experienced marksmen. Yes, sir. Wind compensation tables, atmospheric pressure variables, and temperature impact coefficients. Reina's detailed response surprised several listeners, though their expressions suggested they remained unconvinced that theoretical knowledge translated to practical capability under operational conditions. Hartwell shook his head slowly, his patience clearly wearing thin with what he perceived as an exercise in futility. Sergeant Williams, with respect, we're discussing combat effectiveness, not academic examination scores. Field conditions don't allow time for consulting reference materials or recalculating ballistic solutions when lives depend on immediate, accurate fire. The growing crowd of spectators included personnel from multiple sections of the depot, each person drawn by word of the unusual conversation taking place at what should have been a routine equipment assignment station. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez approached from the motor pool, grease still on his hands from maintenance work, clearly curious about whatever was causing such an unprecedented gathering. Theoretical knowledge has value, but practical application under stress determines mission success or failure, Williams continued, his tone remaining neutral despite the obvious skepticism surrounding them. Have you considered that equipment unfamiliarity could compromise not only your effectiveness, but also endanger the entire reconnaissance team if situations develop beyond initial parameters? The question struck at the heart of military protocol, where individual capabilities directly impacted team survival. Several of the watching personnel nodded agreement, their expressions indicating they viewed this as the definitive argument against approving such an unusual equipment request from someone without demonstrated expertise. I understand the concerns, sir, but I believe my capabilities may exceed current assessments based on limited training opportunities at previous assignments. Reina's careful response avoided claiming expertise she couldn't demonstrate, while maintaining her position that standard equipment might prove inadequate for mission requirements. Current assessments? Davies spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the authority of someone whose opinions influenced operational decisions. Corporal, your personnel file shows basic marksmanship qualifications with standard infantry weapons. No advanced training courses, no specialized certifications, and no supervisor recommendations for precision weapon systems. The assembled personnel seemed to sense that the conversation was approaching its conclusion, with Davies' intervention adding weight to what appeared to be overwhelming evidence against approving such an ambitious equipment request. Chun began gathering standard requisition forms, apparently preparing to process what everyone expected would be a conventional equipment assignment. Torres leaned toward Martinez again, speaking in a stage whisper that carried throughout the immediate area. Betting pool starts at $20. She gets the standard M4 and SCO package. His comment prompted several knowing smiles from personnel who clearly viewed the outcome as predetermined based on established military procedures and common sense. Williams glanced around at the assembled crowd, seemingly aware that this conversation had become far more public than typical equipment discussions. The concrete walls of the depot seemed to amplify every word, creating an arena atmosphere where Reyna found herself defending capabilities that remained unproven according to official documentation. Corporal Vasquez, military protocol exists for excellent reasons. Williams' tone suggested he was preparing to deliver what everyone expected would be the final decision. Equipment assignments matched demonstrated capabilities with mission requirements to ensure optimal effectiveness, while minimizing unnecessary risks to personnel and mission objectives. The depot's atmosphere had transformed into something resembling a tribunal as more personnel continued arriving, drawn by word that spread through the facility about the unprecedented equipment discussion taking place at the requisition desk. Staff Sergeant Palmer emerged from the communications bay, followed by two specialists who abandoned their radio maintenance duties to witness what had become the most unusual supply depot conversation anyone could remember. Rodriguez wiped his greasy hands on a shop rag while positioning himself where he could observe the proceedings without interfering. His weathered face showed the skepticism of someone who had witnessed decades of military operations and understood the difference between ambitious requests and realistic capabilities. Next to him, Specialist Crawford shook her head slowly, apparently amazed that this conversation was continuing despite what seemed like overwhelming evidence against approval. Williams surveyed the growing crowd with visible concern about the public nature of what should have been a straightforward administrative decision. Corporal Vasquez, given the attention this request has generated, perhaps we should discuss your qualifications more privately. His suggestion carried the tone of someone offering a graceful exit from an increasingly untenable situation. With respect, sir, if my qualifications are being questioned publicly, I believe they should be defended publicly as well. Reyna's response prompted surprised expressions from several spectators who clearly expected her to accept the offered escape from what was becoming an embarrassing display of misplaced confidence in her capabilities. Chin looked up from his paperwork with renewed interest, apparently impressed by either her courage or her stubborn refusal to acknowledge reality. Palmer moved closer to the group, his expression suggesting he found this unusual situation professionally interesting rather than merely entertaining like some of the younger personnel present. Defended publicly? Hartwell's voice carried obvious irritation with what he perceived as inappropriate challenge to established military hierarchy. Corporal, your service record speaks for itself. 47 days at this assignment, basic marksmanship scores within acceptable ranges, and zero advanced training documentation. Those aren't opinions to be debated, they're documented facts. The assembled personnel nodded agreement, with varying degrees of enthusiasm, though Williams maintained his neutral expression despite the mounting evidence that seemed to support conventional wisdom about equipment assignments. Davies stepped forward, apparently deciding that additional authority was needed to resolve what was becoming an awkward situation for everyone involved. Sergeant Williams, perhaps we should consider mission requirements from a broader perspective, Davies suggested diplomatically. Multiple team members will be equipped with various weapon systems to ensure comprehensive operational coverage. Individual specialization may be less critical than overall team effectiveness and equipment familiarity. His intervention provided what appeared to be a reasonable compromise that would allow everyone to maintain dignity while acknowledging practical limitations. Several spectators seemed relieved that someone had offered a path toward resolution that didn't require complete humiliation of either party in this increasingly public disagreement. Torres nudged Martinez again, this time speaking more quietly but still audibly to nearby personnel. Smart Money says she takes the standard loadout and this whole thing gets forgotten by tomorrow morning. His prediction prompted knowing looks from several experienced soldiers who understood how military bureaucracy typically handled unusual requests from inexperienced personnel. However, Rodriguez surprised everyone by speaking for the first time since arriving from the motor pool. Hold on a minute. His gravelly voice cut through the murmured conversations, commanding immediate attention from the assembled group. In 22 years of military service, I've learned that sometimes the most unexpected people possess capabilities that don't show up in their paperwork. The depot fell silent as personnel processed this unexpected support from someone whose experience commanded respect throughout the facility. Chin's eyebrows rose as he studied Rodriguez with obvious surprise, clearly not expecting intervention from that particular quarter in favor of what seemed like an obviously problematic request. Rodriguez continued despite the attention his comment had generated. I've seen plenty of soldiers with impressive documentation who couldn't hit targets under pressure, and I've seen others with minimal paperwork who performed miracles when situations demanded it. His weathered hands gestured toward Reyna. Maybe we should focus less on what her file says and more on what she can actually do. Palmer nodded slowly, his expression suggesting he was reconsidering his initial assessment of the situation. The motor pool sergeant's reputation for practical wisdom carried significant weight among personnel who had worked with him over multiple deployments and challenging operational assignments. Williams studied Rodriguez with interest, apparently recognizing that the conversation had taken an unexpected turn that required careful consideration. Sergeant Rodriguez raises an interesting point about the relationship between documentation and actual capability. However, mission planning requires some basis for equipment assignments beyond theoretical possibilities. Crawford whispered something to the specialist beside her, both women apparently fascinated by this unprecedented challenge to standard operating procedures. The conversation had evolved beyond simple equipment requisition into something approaching a debate about military assessment methods and the reliability of conventional wisdom. Hartwell's frustration became more apparent as what should have been a straightforward denial became increasingly complicated by unexpected support for an obviously problematic request. Sergeant Rodriguez, with respect, operational effectiveness requires proven capabilities, not optimistic speculation about hidden talents that may or may not exist. The tension in the depot was becoming palpable as personnel found themselves witnessing something that challenged fundamental assumptions about military protocol and individual assessment. Reyna remained silent during this exchange, apparently recognizing that others were now debating principles that extended beyond her specific equipment request. Davies looked around at the assembled crowd, clearly aware that this conversation had implications beyond the immediate equipment decision. The outcome would either reinforce established procedures or suggest that those procedures might occasionally overlook genuine capability that didn't fit conventional assessment methods. The unexpected support from Rodriguez had shifted the dynamics of the conversation, creating visible divisions among the assembled personnel who now found themselves choosing sides in what had become a debate about fundamental military assessment principles. Palmer stepped closer to the group, his expression thoughtful as he processed the implications of Rodriguez's intervention on behalf of someone whose documented qualifications seemed insufficient for such specialized equipment. Master Sergeant Kellerman appeared from the administrative offices, drawn by reports of an unusual situation developing at the supply depot. His arrival commanded immediate attention from everyone present, as his authority superseded that of anyone currently involved in the discussion. The conversations that had been developing among spectators ceased as personnel recognized that someone with decisive power had entered the situation. What exactly is happening here? Kellerman's question carried the weight of someone accustomed to resolving complex situations quickly and definitively. His weathered face showed no particular emotion as he surveyed the unusual gathering, though his eyes settled on Reyna with the intensity of someone evaluating a potentially problematic personnel issue. Williams straightened to attention, recognizing that the situation now required formal briefing protocols. Master Sergeant, Corporal Vasquez has requested specialized sniper equipment for tomorrow's reconnaissance mission. Specifically, a Barrett M107A1 with custom optics and subsonic ammunition. Her qualifications for such equipment have been questioned based on documented training records. A Barrett system? Kellerman repeated the designation slowly, his tone suggesting he understood both the capabilities of such equipment and the expertise typically required for its effective deployment. His gaze returned to Reyna with increased interest, apparently curious about what had motivated such an ambitious request from someone he didn't immediately recognize. Chun seized the opportunity to present what he viewed as decisive evidence against approval. Master Sergeant, her personnel file shows 47 days at this assignment, basic marksmanship qualifications only, and no documentation of advanced precision weapon training. Standard reconnaissance loadout would be more appropriate for someone with her experience level. The assembled personnel waited silently for Kellerman's response, understanding that his decision would likely be final regardless of previous discussions or competing opinions. Rodriguez maintained his position near the group, apparently prepared to defend his earlier support despite the obvious risk of contradicting what appeared to be overwhelming evidence. Kellerman studied the requisition paperwork that Hartwell offered, his experienced eyes scanning the technical specifications with the familiarity of someone who understood both the capabilities and limitations of various weapon systems. Subsonic 50 caliber ammunition at extended ranges requires extremely precise calculations and environmental compensation that challenges even experienced marksmen. His technical assessment prompted knowing nods from several spectators who viewed this as confirmation that conventional wisdom would prevail over what they perceived as unrealistic ambition. Torres whispered something to Martinez that drew quiet agreement from nearby personnel who clearly expected this intervention to resolve the situation definitively. However, Kellerman surprised everyone by addressing Reyna directly instead of immediately dismissing her request. Corporal Vasquez, what specific operational scenario do you envision that requires capabilities beyond standard reconnaissance equipment? His question suggested genuine interest in her tactical reasoning rather than immediate rejection based on documentation alone. Intelligence indicates enemy positions with hardened observation points at ranges exceeding standard engagement distances. Master Sergeant. The Barrett system would provide both penetration capability for fortified positions and overwatch protection for the reconnaissance team if the situation develops beyond passive observation requirements. Her detailed response demonstrated tactical understanding that impressed several listeners, though their expressions suggested they remained skeptical about her ability to execute such complex operations under actual combat conditions. Palmer nodded slightly, apparently recognizing sound tactical reasoning even if he questioned her qualifications to implement it. Kellerman considered her answer carefully, his expression revealing nothing about his assessment of either her reasoning or her capabilities. Sound tactical analysis, Corporal. However, tactical understanding and operational capability are different requirements. Have you considered the physical demands of carrying and deploying a 30-pound weapon system during extended reconnaissance operations? The weight specification prompted several spectators to glance at Reyna's compact frame, clearly doubting her ability to manage such heavy equipment effectively during the physical demands of field operations. Crawford whispered something to her companion about the challenges that even larger soldiers faced when carrying specialized equipment over difficult terrain. I've calculated the load distribution and believe the operational advantages outweigh the physical challenges, Master Sergeant. Reyna's confident response surprised personnel who expected her to acknowledge limitations when confronted with specific technical challenges that seemed obviously problematic given her physical characteristics. Rodriguez stepped forward again, apparently deciding that his earlier support required reinforcement despite the obvious skepticism from most personnel present. Master Sergeant Kellerman, sometimes the most effective operators don't fit conventional expectations. Her tactical reasoning demonstrates understanding that goes beyond what's reflected in her documentation. The motor pool sergeant's continued support created visible tension among personnel who clearly expected him to defer to conventional wisdom when someone with Kellerman's authority was present. Davies looked uncomfortable with the increasingly complex situation that showed no signs of reaching easy resolution through standard administrative procedures. Kellerman studied both Rodriguez and Reyna with renewed interest, apparently recognizing that experienced personnel don't typically risk their professional credibility supporting questionable requests without compelling reasons. The depot remained unusually quiet as everyone present waited for his assessment of a situation that had evolved far beyond routine equipment assignment protocols. Kellerman's prolonged examination of the requisition paperwork created an atmosphere of suspense that seemed to affect every person present in the depot. The fluorescent lighting cast stark shadows across his weathered features as he processed not only the technical specifications, but also the unusual dynamics that had developed around what should have been a routine equipment decision. The silence stretched until Crawford shifted her weight nervously, the sound of her boots on concrete seeming unusually loud in the tense atmosphere. Palmer checked his watch, apparently aware that this conversation was consuming time that multiple personnel needed for their regular duties. Yet no one seemed willing to leave before witnessing the resolution of this unprecedented situation. Corporal Vasquez, in my 26 years of military service, I've learned that equipment assignments require balancing multiple factors beyond simple qualification checklists. Kellerman's measured tone suggested he was approaching a decision, though his words gave no indication of which direction his assessment was leading. Technical capability, physical requirements, mission parameters, and team dynamics all influence operational effectiveness. His analytical approach prompted several nods from experienced personnel who recognized the complexity of factors that influence combat effectiveness beyond simple documentation. However, the younger soldiers present seemed increasingly puzzled by what they had expected would be a straightforward denial based on obvious qualification deficiencies. Rodriguez maintained his supportive position despite the obvious professional risk of contradicting what most personnel viewed as clear evidence against approval. His continued presence near the group sent a message that his assessment of Reyna's capabilities remained unchanged despite mounting pressure from conventional wisdom and established protocols. "Master Sergeant, if I may add some context," Davies interjected diplomatically. "Tomorrow's mission involves a 4-person reconnaissance team operating in potentially hostile territory. Equipment familiarity and proven reliability become critical factors when team safety depends on individual performance under stress." His intervention appeared designed to emphasize practical considerations over theoretical possibilities. The mention of team safety resonated with personnel throughout the depot, as everyone present understood that individual equipment decisions could impact multiple lives during operational deployments. Torres nodded agreement with Davies' assessment, his expression suggesting he viewed team safety as the definitive argument against experimental equipment assignments. However, Kellerman surprised everyone by addressing a different aspect of the situation entirely. "Sergeant Rodriguez, your assessment of hidden capabilities interests me. What specific observations have led you to support such an unusual request from someone without documented advanced training?" His question suggested genuine curiosity about factors that weren't apparent in official documentation. The depot's attention focused on Rodriguez, who suddenly found himself required to justify his professional assessment to someone whose opinion carried decisive weight. "Master Sergeant, sometimes you observe things that don't appear in personnel files. Attention to detail, analytical thinking, physical coordination that suggests capabilities beyond what's been formally tested or documented." His explanation drew skeptical expressions from several listeners who clearly viewed such subjective assessments as insufficient basis for approving specialized equipment requests. Chen shook his head slightly, apparently believing that gut feelings shouldn't override established qualification requirements designed to ensure operational safety and effectiveness. Kellerman studied Reyna with renewed intensity, his experienced eyes searching for whatever qualities Rodriguez claimed to have observed. The scrutiny was uncomfortable, but she maintained her military bearing despite the obvious pressure of having her capabilities evaluated by someone whose decision would be final and decisive. "Corporal, demonstrate your understanding of ballistic calculations for subsonic 50 caliber ammunition at 1,800 meters with 15-knot crosswind conditions and temperature differential of 25 degrees below standard atmosphere parameters." Kellerman's unexpected technical challenge prompted immediate attention from everyone present, as most personnel recognized this as a complex calculation that challenged even experienced marksmen. The assembled crowd seemed to hold their collective breath as Reyna processed the variables he had specified. Palmer leaned forward slightly, apparently curious whether her theoretical knowledge extended to practical problem-solving under pressure. Several spectators exchanged glances, clearly expecting this technical challenge to expose the limitations of her academic preparation. Wind drift compensation approximately 4.7 inches right. Elevation adjustment 3 clicks up from standard 1800 meters setting, with additional consideration for decreased bullet velocity affecting time of flight and wind exposure duration. Reyna's response came without hesitation, her voice steady despite the obvious pressure of performing complex calculations while being evaluated by multiple experienced personnel. The immediate silence that followed her answer suggested that most listeners lacked the technical knowledge to assess her accuracy, though Kellerman's expression showed no reaction that might indicate whether her calculations were correct or completely wrong. Rodriguez nodded slightly, apparently unsurprised by her demonstration of technical competence. Martinez whispered to Torres, asking whether the numbers sounded reasonable, but Torres could only shrug in response, clearly lacking the specialized knowledge required to evaluate advanced ballistic calculations under the complex conditions Kellerman had specified for his impromptu examination. Kellerman remained silent for several more seconds, apparently processing not only her mathematical accuracy, but also the confidence with which she had delivered calculations that most personnel couldn't even attempt. The depot's atmosphere grew increasingly tense as everyone present waited for his assessment of both her technical demonstration and the broader question of equipment approval. Kellerman's silence stretched beyond what anyone present found comfortable, creating an atmosphere where the slightest sound seemed amplified throughout the concrete-walled depot. His experienced fingers drummed once against the requisition clipboard before he set it down on the counter with deliberate precision, the metallic sound echoing in the unusual quiet that had settled over the assembled personnel. "Those calculations are correct within acceptable margins for field conditions," he announced, his words prompting surprised expressions from multiple spectators who clearly hadn't expected her technical demonstration to withstand professional scrutiny. However, theoretical knowledge and practical application under combat stress remained different requirements entirely. The acknowledgement of her mathematical accuracy created visible uncertainty among personnel who had been confident that her obvious inexperience would result in immediate rejection of such an ambitious equipment request. Crawford exchanged glances with her companion, both women apparently reassessing their assumptions about someone whose capabilities seemed to exceed what her documentation suggested. Rodriguez allowed himself a slight smile of vindication, though he remained positioned where he could continue supporting what was clearly still a contentious situation despite her technical demonstration. Palmer moved closer to the group, his expression showing increased respect for someone who had successfully handled advanced calculations that most personnel couldn't even attempt. Davies stepped forward again, apparently recognizing that the situation required additional practical considerations beyond mathematical competence. "Master Sergeant, while her calculations are impressive, field conditions involve factors that can't be predicted through theoretical preparation. Equipment malfunction, environmental changes, combat stress, and time pressure all affect performance in ways that academic knowledge can't address." His intervention resonated with experienced personnel who understood the difference between controlled testing environments and actual operational conditions, where multiple variables created challenges that no amount of theoretical preparation could completely anticipate. Torres nodded agreement, his expression suggesting he viewed practical experience as irreplaceable regardless of impressive academic demonstrations. Kellerman studied the assembled faces, apparently aware that his decision would either validate conventional wisdom about qualification requirements or suggest that established assessment methods might occasionally overlook genuine capability that didn't fit traditional patterns. The weight of precedent seemed to influence his consideration as much as Reyna's individual circumstances. Corporal Vasquez, assuming your equipment requests were approved, what contingency planning have you developed for equipment malfunction or battlefield damage to primary weapon systems? His question addressed practical operational concerns that extended beyond individual marksmanship capability to encompass broader mission planning and risk management considerations. Standard backup weapon configuration with M4A1 and appropriate ammunition load for close engagement scenarios, sir. Additionally, communication protocols for requesting support or extraction if primary mission parameters change beyond individual capability to manage effectively. Reyna's comprehensive response demonstrated tactical thinking that impressed several listeners, though skeptical expressions suggested that many still doubted her ability to execute such complex planning under actual combat conditions. Chen looked up from his paperwork with obvious surprise at the depth of her contingency planning, apparently not expecting someone with limited documented experience to demonstrate such thorough operational preparation. His expression suggested he was beginning to reconsider his initial assessment of her qualifications, though he remained visibly uncertain about approving such unusual equipment assignments. The conversation had evolved far beyond simple equipment requisition into something approaching comprehensive operational assessment, with multiple experienced personnel contributing perspectives that reflected decades of combined military experience. Martinez whispered to Torres that this was the most complex supply depot discussion he had ever witnessed. Kellerman continued his evaluation with questions that probed increasingly specific aspects of operational planning. Have you considered the acoustic signature differences between subsonic and standard ammunition, and how those factors might influence tactical positioning during extended observation periods? His technical inquiry addressed subtleties that challenged even experienced precision marksmen. Subsonic rounds reduce muzzle flash and acoustic signature significantly, providing concealment advantages during covert observation but requiring closer positioning due to reduced effective range compared to standard high-velocity ammunition. The trade-off favors mission stealth over maximum engagement distance. Reyna's detailed analysis demonstrated understanding of complex tactical considerations that went beyond basic marksmanship knowledge. Rodriguez's expression showed satisfaction at her continued demonstration of expertise that exceeded what her personnel file suggested, while Hartwell appeared increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of a conversation that was challenging his initial assessment based on documented qualifications alone. Palmer addressed Kellerman directly, apparently deciding that additional perspective was needed. Master Sergeant, her technical knowledge is clearly impressive, but tomorrow's mission involves real-world application where mistakes have consequences beyond training scenarios. Are we prepared to risk mission success and team safety based on theoretical capability that hasn't been proven under actual operational conditions? His question crystallized the fundamental tension between recognizing potential capability and maintaining established safety protocols designed to protect personnel and mission objectives. The assembled crowd seemed to sense that the conversation was approaching its decisive moment, where Kellerman would need to balance multiple competing factors in making a determination that would either validate or reject conventional assessment methods. Kellerman studied Reyna one final time, his weathered face revealing nothing about the decision process that was weighing documented limitations against demonstrated technical competence and Rodriguez's professional assessment of capabilities that didn't appear in official records. The tension in the depot had reached a crescendo as Kellerman prepared to render what everyone understood would be his final assessment of a situation that had challenged fundamental assumptions about military protocol and individual capability evaluation. His weathered hands clasped behind his back as he studied not only Reyna, but also the assembled personnel whose professional opinions had created an unprecedented debate over equipment assignment procedures. Corporal Vasquez, your technical knowledge exceeds what your documentation suggests, and your tactical planning demonstrates sophisticated understanding of operational requirements. Kellerman's measured tone gave no indication of his ultimate decision, though his acknowledgement of her capabilities prompted hopeful expressions from Rodriguez and surprised looks from personnel who had expected immediate rejection based on conventional qualification standards. However, he continued, creating immediate tension among listeners who recognized that qualification for such specialized equipment required more than theoretical demonstration. Operational effectiveness demands proven capability under actual field conditions. Academic excellence doesn't necessarily translate to combat performance when lives depend on precision execution under extreme stress. His balanced assessment reflected the complexity of a decision that involved weighing potential capability against established safety protocols designed to protect both individual personnel and mission objectives. Davies nodded agreement with the emphasis on proven performance, while Rodriguez maintained his supportive position despite the obvious challenges that conventional wisdom presented to his assessment. Chun had stopped pretending to work on other paperwork. His complete attention focused on a conversation that was providing the most comprehensive evaluation of individual capability he had witnessed during his administrative career. Palmer checked his watch again, apparently aware that operational schedules were being affected by this extended discussion, yet no one seemed willing to leave before witnessing the resolution. The assembled crowd had grown to include personnel from virtually every section of the depot, creating an audience that transformed a routine equipment assignment into something approaching a public hearing on military assessment methods. Crawford whispered something to her companion about never seeing anything like this situation during her previous assignments. Therefore, Kellerman announced, his tone suggesting he had reached a definitive conclusion. I'm going to propose something unprecedented that addresses both capability demonstration and operational safety requirements. His unexpected statement prompted immediate attention from everyone present, as no one had anticipated a solution that might satisfy both conventional requirements and unconventional circumstances. Specialist Torres from the Armory will accompany us to the firing range, where Corporal Vasquez will demonstrate practical capability with the Barrett system under simulated operational conditions. Kellerman's proposal created surprised expressions throughout the assembled group, as most personnel had expected either approval or denial rather than immediate practical testing of her claims. The suggestion of range testing prompted excited murmurs among spectators who suddenly realized they might witness actual demonstration of capabilities that had been debated theoretically for the past hour. Martinez nudged Torres with obvious enthusiasm, apparently thrilled by the prospect of observing live fire evaluation of such controversial equipment assignment. Rodriguez's expression showed satisfaction that his professional assessment would receive practical validation rather than dismissal based purely on documentation limitations. His continued support had risked his credibility with colleagues, and the opportunity for objective demonstration clearly relieved concerns about potential professional embarrassment if his judgment proved incorrect. However, Davies raised an immediate practical concern that tempered the enthusiasm surrounding Kellerman's proposal. Master Sergeant, range testing under controlled conditions differs significantly from operational deployment, where environmental factors, time pressure, and combat stress create variables that can't be replicated during evaluation exercises. His observation reflected legitimate concerns about the relationship between training performance and combat effectiveness that experienced personnel understood from multiple deployments. Hartwell nodded agreement, apparently viewing range demonstration as insufficient proof of capability that would justify such unusual equipment assignment for actual operational missions. Kellerman acknowledged the limitation with a slight nod before addressing the broader implications of his testing proposal. Sergeant Davies raises valid concerns about controlled versus operational conditions. However, demonstrated competence under any measurable standards provides better assessment foundation than speculation about theoretical capabilities that remain completely unproven. The logic of his approach impressed several listeners who recognized that practical demonstration, however limited, offered more reliable assessment than continued debate about documentation versus potential capability. Palmer seemed particularly interested in the testing proposal, apparently viewing it as reasonable compromise between rigid protocol adherence and blind acceptance of unproven claims. Chun gathered the standard requisition forms that had been waiting throughout the extended discussion, apparently preparing to process whatever equipment assignment resulted from the unprecedented evaluation process that Kellerman had proposed. His expression suggested curiosity about whether practical testing would validate or expose the limitations of impressive theoretical demonstrations. Corporal Vasquez, are you prepared to demonstrate the capabilities you've claimed under direct observation by qualified personnel? Kellerman's direct question created the moment of truth that would either vindicate her confidence or expose the gap between academic knowledge and practical execution that many skeptics expected to become apparent under actual testing conditions. The depot fell completely silent as everyone present waited for her response to what represented the ultimate test of whether her unusual equipment request was based on genuine capability or misplaced confidence in theoretical preparation that wouldn't withstand practical application under professional scrutiny. Yes, sir, I'm prepared to demonstrate my capabilities. Reina's steady response cut through the silence with unwavering confidence that surprised even Rodriguez, who had supported her throughout the extended interrogation. Her acceptance of Kellerman's challenge prompted immediate movement among the assembled personnel, as what had been theoretical debate was about to become practical demonstration with measurable results. Specialist Torres emerged from the secure armory section carrying the Barrett M107A1 system with the reverence typically reserved for handling precision instruments worth more than most soldiers' annual salaries. The massive weapon seemed to dwarf even Torres' substantial frame, emphasizing the physical challenges that many personnel had questioned regarding Reina's ability to manage such sophisticated equipment effectively. The procession toward the firing range resembled something between a formal inspection and a public trial, with virtually every available person from the depot following at respectful distances to witness what had become the most unusual capability demonstration anyone could remember. Crawford whispered to her companion that this felt like witnessing military history in the making. Martinez had positioned himself where he could observe every detail of the testing process, his expression mixing excitement with skepticism about whether the impressive theoretical demonstrations would translate to actual marksmanship under professional scrutiny. Palmer walked alongside Davies, both senior personnel, discussing the implications of this unprecedented evaluation method for future equipment assignment protocols. The outdoor firing range stretched across several hundred meters of carefully maintained terrain, with target positions at various distances designed to test different weapon systems under controlled but realistic conditions. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the range, creating lighting conditions that would challenge even experienced marksmen attempting precision shots at extended distances. Kellerman established the testing parameters with the precision of someone who understood that the results would either validate or discredit an assessment method that departed significantly from established military protocols. Target distance 1,800 meters, wind conditions approximately 12 knots from the northwest, temperature 73 degrees with standard atmosphere pressure. The technical specifications prompted several spectators to exchange glances, recognizing that these conditions presented legitimate challenges that would test genuine capability rather than allowing success through favorable circumstances. Torres checked the Barrett scope configuration while Chun verified ammunition specifications, both personnel ensuring that equipment functionality wouldn't compromise the evaluation's validity. Rodriguez positioned himself where he could observe both the firing position and the target area, his weathered face showing the tension of someone whose professional credibility was about to receive public validation or embarrassment based on assessment capabilities that had challenged conventional wisdom throughout his career. The assembled crowd maintained respectful silence as Reina approached the Barrett system that Torres had positioned on its bipod support. The weapon's imposing presence seemed to emphasize the magnitude of her earlier claims about capabilities that remained unproven despite impressive theoretical demonstrations during the depot interrogation. She knelt behind a rifle with movements that appeared natural despite the obvious complexity of the equipment and the unprecedented pressure of performing under direct observation by experienced personnel whose assessment would determine both her immediate equipment assignment and broader questions about military evaluation methods. Hartwell stood with arms crossed, his expression clearly conveying expectation that practical testing would expose the limitations of academic preparation when confronted with actual marksmanship requirements under professional scrutiny. Chun checked his clipboard, apparently preparing to document results that he expected would vindicate conventional assessment procedures. The scope adjustment process required several minutes of careful calculation and mechanical precision, with Reyna making modifications based on the environmental conditions that Kellerman had specified for the evaluation. Her methodical approach impressed several observers, though skeptical expressions suggested that many viewed preparation as less significant than actual shooting performance. Palmer consulted his own rangefinder, confirming the target distance, while Davies observed wind conditions that would affect bullet trajectory during the extended flight time required for subsonic ammunition to reach targets at 1,800 meters. The environmental factors created legitimate challenges that would test capabilities rather than allowing success through favorable circumstances. Torres announced that all equipment was functioning properly and ammunition was loaded according to specifications, his formal confirmation establishing that technical factors wouldn't compromise the evaluation's validity. The moment had arrived when theoretical knowledge and practical capability would either align or reveal the gap that skeptics expected to become apparent. Kellerman raised his hand for silence, though the assembled crowd had already fallen quiet in anticipation of witnessing a demonstration that would resolve questions about capability assessment that had challenged conventional wisdom throughout the extended depot discussion. Every person present understood they were about to witness something unprecedented. Corporal Vasquez, you may proceed when ready. His formal authorization created the moment of truth where months of theoretical preparation would either validate or expose the limitations of academic knowledge when confronted with actual precision marksmanship requirements under professional observation and environmental conditions that challenged even experienced personnel. The firing range fell into absolute silence as Reyna settled into position behind the Barrett system, her compact frame adjusting to the massive weapon with movements that appeared both deliberate and surprisingly natural. Every person present held their breath as she began the final scope adjustments, her fingers working with precision that impressed even the most skeptical observers who had expected awkwardness with unfamiliar equipment. Torres positioned himself at the spotting scope, his role as official observer adding formal credibility to whatever results would emerge from this unprecedented demonstration. Palmer checked his stopwatch, apparently timing the preparation process to assess whether her methodical approach reflected genuine expertise or excessive caution masking inexperience with the sophisticated equipment. The wind conditions had shifted slightly since Kellerman's initial assessment, requiring additional calculations that Reyna performed silently while the assembled crowd waited with visible tension. Martinez whispered to Crawford that he had never seen such concentrated attention focused on a single firing range demonstration during his entire military career. Hartwell maintained his skeptical expression, clearly expecting that actual shooting performance would expose limitations that impressive theoretical knowledge couldn't overcome when confronted with the physical and mental demands of precision marksmanship under professional scrutiny. His arms remained crossed as he prepared to witness what he anticipated would be vindication of conventional assessment procedures. Chun had positioned himself where he could observe both the firing position and the target area through binoculars, his administrative perspective focused on documenting results that would either validate or challenge established equipment assignment protocols. Davy stood nearby, his expression reflecting the professional interest of someone whose opinions influenced operational decisions throughout the facility. The target at 1,800 meters appeared as a barely visible speck even through magnified optics, emphasizing the technical challenges that made successful engagement at such distances a test of genuine expertise rather than basic marksmanship capability. Rodriguez maintained his supportive position, though even his confident expression showed traces of tension as his professional assessment faced public validation or embarrassment. Breathing control, sight alignment, trigger preparation, environmental compensation. Reina's mental checklist proceeded with the systematic precision of someone whose preparation extended far beyond academic study of technical manuals. Her entire body seemed to settle into the weapon system with integration that suggested familiarity despite documented lack of previous bear experience. The first shot's thunderous report echoed across the range with the distinctive signature of 50 caliber ammunition, the sound so powerful that several unprepared spectators flinched involuntarily. The massive rifle's recoil appeared manageable despite concerns about her physical ability to control such a powerful weapon system effectively during actual firing sequences. Torres called through his spotting scope immediately after the shot. Hit! Center mass. His announcement prompted absolute stunned silence from the assembled crowd, as virtually everyone present had expected either a complete miss or marginal accuracy that would justify conventional wisdom about the relationship between documentation and actual capability. The silence stretched for several seconds as personnel processed results that contradicted their expectations so dramatically that some appeared to question whether they had heard the spotter's call correctly. Chun lowered his binoculars slowly, his expression showing the confusion of someone whose fundamental assumptions about qualification assessment had just been challenged by undeniable evidence. Hartwell's arms uncrossed as his mouth opened slightly, his prepared vindication of conventional procedures replaced by obvious bewilderment at witnessing capability that seemed impossible based on documented qualifications and apparent inexperience with a specific weapon system she had just employed with apparent expertise. Rodriguez allowed himself a satisfied smile that acknowledged both vindication of his professional assessment and recognition that his willingness to challenge conventional wisdom had been justified by results that surprised even him. Palmer checked his stopwatch again, apparently documenting timing that reflected preparation efficiency as well as shooting accuracy. Crawford whispered something to her companion about never witnessing anything comparable during multiple deployments, her tone conveying amazement rather than the skepticism that had characterized most observers' expectations throughout the extended evaluation process. Martinez stood with his mouth open, clearly struggling to reconcile what he had just witnessed with his assumptions about the relationship between experience and performance. But the demonstration wasn't finished. Kellerman stepped forward with an expression that revealed nothing about his assessment of results that had already exceeded most expectations dramatically. Corporal Vasquez, that was impressive shooting. However, operational effectiveness requires consistency rather than individual exceptional performance. Please engage the same target with 4 additional rounds. His request for multiple shots created renewed tension among spectators who recognized that single successful shots could result from luck rather than genuine capability, while consistent accuracy under pressure would provide more reliable assessment of operational effectiveness. The additional challenge seemed designed to distinguish between exceptional individual performance and sustained precision capability. Torres confirmed target status and prepared to observe the continuation of what had already become the most remarkable marksmanship demonstration anyone present could remember witnessing. The assembled crowd maintained their fascinated attention as Reina prepared for the ultimate test of whether her initial success represented genuine capability or fortunate circumstances that wouldn't repeat under continued scrutiny. Davies approached Kellerman quietly, apparently recognizing that consistent accuracy at 1,800 meters would require reassessment of fundamental assumptions about capability evaluation and equipment assignment protocols that had guided military procedures throughout their combined decades of experience. The second shot followed within 30 seconds of Kellerman's request for sustained demonstration, its thunderous report rolling across the range with the same devastating power that had announced the first round's departure. Reyna's recoil management appeared effortless despite the Barrett's massive energy transfer, her body position remaining stable through the weapon cycle with integration that suggested far more experience than her documentation indicated. Hit. Center mass. Torres' call came with slightly less surprise in his voice, though his tone still conveyed amazement at witnessing sustained precision that exceeded what most experienced marksmen achieved during their best performances. The assembled spectators remained frozen in position, apparently struggling to process results that systematically demolished every assumption they had maintained about capability assessment procedures. Chen had stopped taking notes entirely, his clipboard hanging forgotten at his side as he stared through binoculars at target impacts that defied logical explanation based on documented qualifications and apparent equipment unfamiliarity. His administrative perspective had never encountered such dramatic disconnect between official records and actual performance under professional observation. The third shot's preparation took slightly longer as wind conditions shifted, requiring environmental compensation adjustments that Reyna calculated with visible precision before settling back into her firing position. Her methodical approach demonstrated technical sophistication that impressed even Kellerman, whose experience included observing some of the military's most capable precision marksmen during operational deployments. Palmer moved closer to Davies, both senior personnel, exchanging quiet observations about witnessing something that would require fundamental reassessment of equipment assignment protocols and capability evaluation methods that had guided their professional decisions throughout multiple decades of combined military service. Hit. Center mass. The third confirmation from Torres prompted visible reactions throughout the assembled crowd, as sustained accuracy at 1,800 meters under environmental conditions eliminated any possibility that initial success had resulted from fortunate circumstances rather than genuine expertise with sophisticated weapon systems. Hartwell's skeptical expression had transformed into something approaching wonder as he watched someone whose personnel file suggested basic qualifications demonstrate mastery that challenged seasoned snipers during their most successful range sessions. His professional understanding of marksmanship difficulty made the sustained performance even more remarkable than casual observers might appreciate. Rodriguez's vindication was complete, though even his confidence in unconventional assessment methods hadn't prepared him for witnessing such overwhelming demonstration of capabilities that remained completely absent from official documentation. His willingness to challenge conventional wisdom had been justified beyond his most optimistic expectations. The fourth shot's preparation required minimal adjustment, suggesting that Reyna had established consistent environmental compensation that accounted for atmospheric conditions with precision that typically developed through years of specialized training rather than theoretical study of technical manuals during off-duty hours. Crawford grabbed her companion's arm as the fourth shot's report echoed across the range, her excitement building as she realized she was witnessing something unprecedented that would become legendary among depot personnel regardless of whatever operational assignments followed this extraordinary demonstration of hidden capability. Hit. Center mass. Torres F. Our confirmation created an atmosphere where normal conversations seemed impossible, as every person present understood they had witnessed marksmanship that exceeded most professional snipers' capabilities despite coming from someone whose qualifications appeared insufficient for basic precision weapon assignment, according to established military procedures. Martinez stood with his mouth still open, apparently calculating the odds of achieving 4 consecutive center mass hits at 1,800 meters under actual field conditions with environmental variables that challenged even experienced marksmen during their most focused performance sessions. Kellerman approached the firing position as Reyna completed her demonstration, his expression revealing professional respect that hadn't been present during the initial equipment requisition discussion. His decades of military experience provided context for appreciating the technical difficulty of what she had just accomplished under direct observation by skeptical personnel. The fifth and final shot seemed almost anticlimactic given the sustained excellence that had characterized the entire demonstration, though every person present maintained complete attention as Reyna settled into position for what would either complete a perfect demonstration or introduce human error that might provide some explanation for the impossible performance they had witnessed. The Barrett's final report seemed to hang in the air longer than previous shots, as if emphasizing the significance of a demonstration that had systematically destroyed conventional wisdom about the relationship between documented qualifications and actual operational capability under professional scrutiny and environmental conditions. Hit center mass. Torres' final confirmation created absolute silence that seemed to acknowledge collective recognition that they had witnessed something that would require fundamental reassessment of military capability evaluation methods and equipment assignment procedures that had guided professional decisions throughout their combined centuries of military experience. 5 consecutive center mass hits at 1,800 meters under field conditions with environmental variables. Kellerman's formal summary carried the weight of someone whose professional credibility depended on accurate assessment of capabilities that had just exceeded his most optimistic expectations for personnel with such limited documented qualifications. The assembled crowd remained motionless as the implications of sustained precision performance settled into their understanding, each person processing results that challenged fundamental assumptions about qualification assessment and the reliability of conventional wisdom regarding individual capability evaluation under operational conditions. Kellerman studied the target through his own binoculars with the thoroughness of someone whose professional reputation depended on accurate assessment of capabilities that had just shattered every assumption about qualification evaluation and equipment assignment protocols. The 5 perfect shots clustered within a grouping that would challenge the facility's most experienced marksmen during their best performances. Corporal Vasquez, in 26 years of military service, I have never witnessed marksmanship of this caliber from personnel with your documented qualifications. His measured tone carried both professional respect and obvious curiosity about explanations for performance that seemed impossible based on official records and apparent equipment unfamiliarity. The assembled crowd maintained their stunned silence as they processed results that required fundamental reassessment of assumptions about capability assessment methods that had guided their professional decisions throughout multiple decades of combined military experience. Chen's clipboard remained forgotten at his side as he struggled to reconcile administrative records with undeniable evidence of exceptional capability. Rodriguez stepped forward with an expression that mixed vindication with genuine curiosity about factors that had enabled him to recognize capabilities that remained completely absent from official documentation. His professional assessment had been justified beyond his most optimistic expectations, though even his confidence hadn't prepared him for witnessing such overwhelming demonstration. Sir, my qualifications may be more extensive than current documentation indicates. Reyna's careful response prompted immediate attention from every person present, as her words suggested explanations for performance that had systematically demolished conventional wisdom about the relationship between official records and actual operational capability. Kellerman's eyebrows rose as he processed implications of her statement. More extensive qualifications, Corporal? His question carried the weight of someone whose authority included access to personnel records that typically contained comprehensive documentation of specialized training and operational experience that would explain such extraordinary marksmanship capability. The tension in the assembled crowd was palpable as everyone present realized they were about to receive explanations for what had appeared to be impossible performance based on documented limitations and apparent inexperience with sophisticated weapon systems that required years of specialized training for effective operational deployment. My previous assignment involved specialized operations that required security classifications beyond standard personnel file documentation, sir. Reyna's response created immediate understanding among experienced personnel who recognized that certain military positions involved capabilities that remained absent from routine administrative records for operational security reasons. Palmer exchanged significant glances with Davies, both senior personnel apparently recognizing implications of classified assignments that would explain performance capabilities while maintaining security protocols that prevented documentation in standard personnel files accessible to routine administrative review. Kellerman's expression showed professional interest rather than surprise, suggesting that his experience included awareness of specialized positions that required exceptional capabilities while maintaining operational security through limited documentation in accessible records. "What was your operational designation, Corporal?" The question created absolute silence throughout the assembled group as everyone present understood they were about to receive information that would explain extraordinary performance that had challenged fundamental assumptions about qualification assessment and conventional wisdom regarding individual capability evaluation. "Black Falcon, sir." Reyna's quiet response prompted immediate recognition among several senior personnel whose experience included awareness of legendary operational designations that represented the highest levels of specialized capability within military precision marksmanship communities. The effect of her callsign revelation was immediate and dramatic. Kellerman's professional demeanor transformed into something approaching reverence as he processed the significance of a designation that represented operational excellence at levels that few personnel ever achieved during their entire military careers. "Black Falcon?" Davies repeated the call sign with obvious amazement, his voice carrying recognition of a legendary designation that had achieved mythical status among precision marksmanship communities throughout multiple operational theaters during recent conflict deployments. Chen's clipboard clattered to the concrete floor as his hands went slack with shock at discovering that someone whose administrative file suggested basic qualifications actually carried one of the most respected operational designations in military sniper communities. His administrative perspective had never encountered such dramatic security classification limitations. "Holy shit," whispered Martinez, his comment echoing the collective amazement of personnel who suddenly understood they had been questioning someone whose capabilities exceeded those of virtually any marksman in active service. Crawford grabbed her companion's arm again, her excitement reflecting recognition of witnessing military legend in person. Rodriguez's satisfied expression acknowledged that his assessment of hidden capabilities had been vindicated in ways that exceeded even his most confident expectations about recognizing potential that didn't appear in accessible documentation due to operational security requirements. Kellerman stepped forward with obvious respect for someone whose operational designation commanded recognition throughout military precision communities. "Ma'am, your equipment request is approved without reservation. Additionally, I apologize for the extended evaluation process that was clearly unnecessary given your documented capabilities under appropriate security classifications." The formal approval and apology created visible relief among personnel who suddenly understood that their skepticism had been directed towards someone whose actual qualifications exceeded those of virtually anyone present despite administrative limitations that prevented routine documentation of specialized operational achievements. If this story moved you, please drop a comment and share your thoughts about your favorite moment or character, or tell us about someone you know who showed hidden strength when others doubted them. Sometimes the most capable people are the ones whose true abilities remain hidden until the moment when extraordinary circumstances reveal their exceptional nature.